Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to another one of these live stream evenings, Lockdown 2.0. You keep the lockdowns coming, we'll keep the live streams coming. I'm very happy to be joined by Margaret, Soraya, and I'm actually, what I'm going to do, Margaret, I'm going to make us a little bit bigger there just for a sec. Hey, there we go. Anyone who's coming along, and firstly, actually, welcome, Margaret.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you back. We have done the Locks of Scotland a few weeks ago now. They've all kind of merged into one in my brain. But anyone who's watching along, you'll see it's slightly different tonight. I am testing a new streaming platform live. That's a slightly bold thing to do. Margaret's very, very bravely agreed to come on and give it a go with me. So I thank her for that. And we'll be doing our best to keep up with that and keep up with the comments. It might make it a little easier for me to do that and feature you guys. If you have any questions, do let us know in the comments and I will pick those up and I will ask Margaret and or myself, because tonight Margaret and I are sort of doing double duty. We're sharing this one, and maybe do you want to outline, Margaret, the general plan to do with what we're looking back on photographically with our work recently?
Yeah, sure. So I am going to show some images which have all been taken from lockdown onwards. And we're talking about shooting close to home. So that's particularly relevant at the moment. I think England is locked down. I'm sorry, we're not. I have to apologise for that. But I know, it's not easy at the moment. So we're talking about shooting close to home, and we've both got a different perspective on that. So we thought it'd be nice to show you our two versions of what we did during lockdown and some of the images that have gone along with that.
Yeah, nice. And actually tonight, you guys, probably the vast majority are watching on Facebook. However, we are actually streaming this live to YouTube as a bit of a test. And so if anyone is out there watching us on YouTube, we haven't promoted that, but someone may have stumbled across it. Do let us know in the comments and I'll try and say hello to you there as well. I can see some regular names coming in from various places across the UK and further afield. And actually, Margaret, we have David with us from Bad Homburg in Germany, where you currently have an exhibition going on, don't you?
That's right, yes. Hello, David.
So anyone out there, Taunus Photo Gallery is a new photographic exhibition place in Germany, and good old Margaret has a wonderful body of work on there at the moment, which has had some images at Boston Gallery as well recently. So I know you've been really busy with that, so we might get into that. But shall I just add in the screen? Let's see if we can do that. He says confidently. There we go. It's all happening, everybody.
Well done.
So how we're going to kind of work it is, like I say, we are going to split it, and I'm just going to kind of let Margaret explain some of her photographic lockdown journey, and I'll jump in here and there if I have something intelligent to add. And if you are watching out there and you feel like you have something intelligent to add, do let us know in the comments and I will pick those up as I say. And anything at all to do with her way of shooting, etc., etc. And just before I throw over to you, Margaret, I think the big thing we want to get across tonight is a couple of things. One, that it's very valid for everybody to have different approaches to photography, and that's one of the great things about it. And myself and Margaret probably work in some similar ways and some very different ways, and that's great. But also that this stuff's all been done very close to home. And we are both, I think, really big believers that you can go out and be super creative in your local area. And especially in the current situation, hopefully that's going to be helpful for you to think about. But Margaret, let me shut up and we'll get you going. And if you want to kick us off and maybe just explain this whole process of how you approach the photography in this period and why, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. So basically I've got a series of, I think it's about 7 images to start off with. I don't particularly want to talk about each particular images, so we'll just go through them as I'm talking slowly. And what I want to do is to explain why I wanted to show these images to you all and tell you the story behind them. Now, I want to, whenever I speak, I always speak from a genuine desire to help others and to inspire other people. So everything that I'm saying today is to help you and your in your own photography and in your own time at the moment, because for me, helping other people and inspiring other people to shoot is enough for me. It makes me really, really happy. So basically, I think in these past few months, we've all had our own battles this year, haven't we? And we've all had to adapt and to settle for things. Ideals aren't always possible, and travel to places that we've wanted to go to shoot has been more difficult. So the concept of shooting close to home has become more important than it's ever been. And this is to allow us to continue with our creativity during, I think, a time when we need it more than ever. And just talking a little bit about that, if you don't mind, just for a minute, I think that the importance of creativity in our lives it's just so big just now. And I think that, you know, the world often suggests to us that being creative is indulgent or luxurious or maybe selfish, even it's an activity that's, you know, frivolous, and you're better to invest in other things, whatever that might be. We don't quite know what that be. Is it work? I don't know. But what is more valuable than this? But what I would say is that creativity is the most important thing that we can do. So, you know, if you think of it like this, have you ever noticed that everybody goes along in their life working away and they're raising families, they're building homes, and then suddenly something happens in life? So like a relative dies, or you get heartbroken, or we face tough times. And then suddenly we reach for music and poetry and art and photography. And we reach for that to make sense of what's happening and to find out if anybody else has ever felt this way and how they've dealt with it, and how it can be an outlet for our emotions and somewhere to place those feelings. So if you think of it like that, creativity is absolutely essential. So after work and shelter, I suppose you can look at it like, well, love and creativity makes us human. So it's almost oxygen for our souls. So, you know, it's something that's so important at the moment in these particular times as well. So anyway, this series of images that I'm showing just now are the results of my work from the beginning of lockdown, which was March the 20-something, was it? And in the following months. And, you know, many of you know that I am mostly a coastal photographer, and I've got a real love of waves and coast, you know, but also actually I've always loved shooting these small mini landscapes as well. The details in the landscape, because it kind of absorbs you in a really special way. And like unremarkable grasses become curious little worlds, and the beauty that is around us everywhere actually is highlighted, and opens your eyes a little bit to it. So were you going to say something there, Sam?
Margaret, I was just going to ask, you know, from the point of view of creativity, and allowing yourself to go and be creative, there are times when I guess you just feel like you're hitting a brick wall. Do you have to choose your moments with that? And are there days where it's just not happening and you have to maybe put the camera down and swim, in your case, or whatever else it might be?
I think sometimes with creativity, I think it doesn't always naturally flow, does it? I think what's really helpful is to see it as something as fun and enjoyment, and taking away the pressures of having to create an amazing image or having to produce anything. So I think sometimes if you take all that away and just let yourself go out and do something just that's enjoyable, and almost see it as throwaway. Can we say that? Can we throw away images? Can we have fun with our iPhones? Can we do something that's just a little bit, you know, enjoyable? And then taking away the need for it to be amazing work. And it's just as valid if you create in a fun, playful way. So like a couple of days ago, I was wanting to do something a bit different. And so I took my phone in the water with me. I've got little housing for it, it's okay. And it's just really, I just really enjoy doing that. I'm not going to do anything with those images. They're not going to get displayed anywhere, but I just enjoy doing them. And that makes me feel happy and fulfilled. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And actually, there's a good comments just come in. If we can just throw to that quickly, it's useful to think about the motivation behind the process of creativity. I don't know what you might say to that, Margaret, but
yeah, I mean, I think creativity. There's a few things that there are a few motivations. One of them is a kind of almost an outlet for your. It's kind of like a therapy, like art therapy. So it's an outlet for emotions. I certainly use it like that. If there's anything disturbing me, I'll reach for my camera. I'll just do it instinctively. There's also the the fact that it's a very mindful activity, so it's really, really good for your well-being. And so basically it just makes you feel better. And if you wanted to feel better, then do something that you know is going to help with that, and have so you're almost taking a break from your life for a few moments or an hour in a mindful activity. So for well-being, it's definitely essential.
And it sounds very much like one of the main things you're saying is that the act of actually doing and feeling and being there, and that the moment of right there when you're creating it is the big thing. Maybe a lot of there's too much emphasis on the end, the end result, the whatever you're going to do with it. But really, it's the doing of it that's part of the joy for you.
It is for me, definitely. I've got a friend who paints, and she told me once last year, and I'll never forget this. She said, I paint every night for 5 minutes before I go to sleep, and I throw that picture away every night. And I was horrified. But actually, I quite like that idea, because then there's no pressure behind it.
Yeah, that's
so
nice.
You have to think about that one.
I have to get my paints out. I'm not sure that'll get down well at home, but there you go. So you mentioned these are all very close by as well, Margaret. So we're literally within a few minutes of the house. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'll tell you my little story, and that'll explain it all. Cool. So back late March, a few of you know this. I don't know if anybody else does, but I had COVID very, very early on, and what happened after was quite unexpected. I didn't recover at all, and 8 months on, I'm just getting back to being able to walk any distances and carry my kit again. So basically my lungs were damaged, and I was suffering from long COVID, and that meant, so in the first 4 months I couldn't really walk more than like 3 minutes, I'd say, from my back door. Now I live in the Highlands of Scotland, so the freedom that we have still compared to others, living in built-up areas is ridiculous. Actually, I could walk for 10 hours from my back door without seeing anybody. So there was no restrictions as such. But ironically, I didn't have the ability during those months. So I was literally confined to these few yards till August, I'd say. So despite this and the confines and the other stresses that may have come with it, I was actually really happy during these few months. And that, I think that was partly down to carrying on to create and spending time focused on my photography. I was very, very focused. Now I've got this garden area at the back door where there's one little patch of wild grass, and I've never really stopped and looked at it before. I've always thought, oh, it's really nice, and I look at it and walk past and go off to wherever I'm going or shooting. But basically this little small patch of grass became my subject matter for like 4 months. And so I'd sit for an hour or 2 hours watching the grasses and listening to the birds. It was really sunny. We had a lovely summer, as we all did. And I was watching like ladybirds crawl about and bees land on the flowers, and it was actually really soothing. I spent more time in that section, just very, very mindful and very, very peaceful. So I think that maybe one of the points I have here is that I felt very grateful for everything, and I do know that when I'm out in nature of any sort, I connect very quickly to gratefulness, almost immediately. And if gratefulness plays a big part in happiness, then it makes sense to do more of the things that make you happy. So for me, that's nature, but for other people, it might be colors or textures, or creating water droplets with splash indoors. That might make you happy, and that might make you feel absorbed and mindful and in the moment. But for me, it's being outdoors.
Yeah, it's amazing how many different sorts of little mini projects people got on with and took out there. And I mean, obviously, you've experienced the downsides of COVID physically, very much so. So we're not jumping over that, but we're trying to obviously make the point that we all got thrown into this, and we all understand the severity of that. But a lot of people, it was interesting to see what they did do with it. And actually, Lynn has just said, I found lockdown, the original one, very liberating in terms of my photography, because I just shot constantly and let go of trying to produce something quote unquote good. My images were better for it, or maybe you enjoyed the process even more as well, Lynn. And I think that's a great way to look at it as well. And just, Margaret, the fact these I mean, I know we're not heavily talking about the images tonight in a way, but I quite like that because we're talking about all the reasons why we love photography and why it's so important to us in the same and different ways. But these are just great examples of capturing mood as well. You know, you're talking about the importance to you, but even, you know, bringing that through in the image with the way they're shot is really beautiful too. And these little scenes, you know, you needn't be overlooking the Grand Canyon to still do something, you know, super compelling photographically.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I was looking to play with light, and obviously I'm shooting into the sun quite a lot. I'm playing with light and lenses and, you know, distance, depth of field, and, you know, basically lying in this grass. So I'm looking at different ways of photographing these to produce a space to produce a little bit of a reflection of how I'm feeling. And I think they're quite joyous. I like this one particularly, actually. I think this is quite lovely. I like the bend in the. I think they're quite happy images. To me, they are anyway. So, yeah.
I think whenever we have that light, there's an immediate uplifting feel to it, isn't there? When we get that diffuse light as well, and yes, the sort of arching of the different grasses. I struggle massively with hay fever, so this is not my domain.
Oh dear.
I let you just lie down and do this. You're going to see later I don't go near the grass. But actually, this is a good comment, Margaret. Sorry, and I know we're sort of jumping in a little bit with the comments, but we want this to be quite an open and kind of two-way thing. We don't just want to talk at you for an hour. So Linda said she took Sue Brown's advice and went out and shot with a lens I didn't use. Set me off, and I've made a book, and I'm working on turning it into a handmade book, and this would not have happened otherwise. So Linda, good work. That is a great way to do it, isn't it? To set yourself other parameters or disrupt yourself by taking out different equipment or going to a different place or just concentrating in the garden like you did in some bits, you know, just to make that work, because it can be done anywhere, right?
Definitely. I think we saw so much creativity come out of those few months. It was really lovely to see. There was a lot of bookmaking going on, I noticed. And
more on that later.
Oh yes. And sort of indoor floral photography. How wonderful is that? You know, maybe, you know, 2020 has been an odd year, but maybe it's been a time that we actually grow in different ways if we open ourselves out to those possibilities and allow that to come in. You know, there's so many opportunities that in this time that we've been given as well.
I think one of the things in this image why it brings it up, you know, maybe did you find a lot of people said to you that they were kind of noticing a lot more about their local environment? Now, we all know as photographers, we kind of vaguely know when it's quote unquote bluebell season, but I certainly found I was kind of just in tune a bit more with how nature was changing, more birds in the garden, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So did that infiltrate with the photography just naturally because you were out there watching and looking?
Yeah, do you know, I felt this year that this has been the first summer that I've seen. I've actually seen some, you know, honestly, I'm normally so busy, I'm running around from one thing to the other. And normally my summers are my busiest time of year. And I don't think I've ever sat in the garden as much as I did and watched the trees change and things grow and the grasses change from one thing to the other, you know, and the seasons, even autumn's been as well. It's been quite slow as well for everybody. I've shot more this year, lockdown, than I would normally do because I know it's different for other people are working harder than ever, but a lot of us have been given time, you know. So I've definitely connected to the environment so much more this year than I have done in years, which is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I suppose then it's a case of how that translates into the imagery. Do you feel like you're just literally being more visually aware of the textures and the colours and whatnot around you?
I think so. I think it's time as well. For me, it's having the time to do it because I would be out photographing every day if I had time, not editing them, but just photographing. Because I love just being outdoors. I just want to be outside all the time. I don't really mind about the weather. So having that extra time for me has been absolutely amazing. And I've also grown to love the area that I live in more because I used to travel away from it. I still do. I still travel away to the islands quite a lot. But I've grown to love the area, and I've definitely, my ears have been open to my back garden. It is quite a nice back garden, I have to say. But I've grown to love it, actually, and coming into and bringing that into the the images, it's really nice to see the set, you know, as we've got them up here, to see what you can produce from one patch of grass.
Yeah. So just from a point of view of helping people, you know, as we go into this autumnal period, certainly in England, we're all locked in a bit, as you know. But obviously we can get out and have our exercise, and you know, I'm just taking a camera along is perfectly valid there, I think. Are there things you would? That's a difficult question, but are there things you would just encourage people to look out for, or how to find order in some of that very busy situations, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think, obviously, I live in a completely different area. It's very hard for me to imagine to be in a city again. It's so remote for me. But I think if you can find a tree, and I assume most people can find trees, you can create images. So I was in the woods, which are literally at the back of my house recently, and I was thinking, oh, what can I do here? And then I just looked up, and there was lovely tree, the leaves against the sky. So there's lots of abstract images. There's abstract images everywhere. There's textures on walls, and there's light patterns, and there's all sorts of images that you can create. Probably mostly abstract if you're really limited. But then you can also have some fun with those and do some ICM or use your iPhone in unusual manners. This image that you've just shown, this is just ferns. So again, these were actually in June or July when it was really green. So I'm just playing with the light here and using a really shallow depth of field to create. In fact, I'm shooting through another fern to get that feeling. So you know, you can create these little abstract images from anything really.
Yeah, I think the color is a great theme to play with as well. Perhaps, you know, Margaret mentioned there, you know, just find one interesting tree, honestly. And like she said, there's so many things you can do with it. It's just being open-minded to it and actually setting that parameter of sticking to that tree every time you go out, have a look at it is actually, you think you're limiting yourself, but really I would argue, I don't know if you'd agree, Margaret, but that you probably, you're doing the opposite of that.
I think so. Yeah.
And you know, this green is amazing, and imagine a nice set of images where that green is referenced across different things, you know, etc., etc. So no, it's very elegant stuff, that, Margaret, especially in, I suppose colour brings its own mood, doesn't it? You know, if we're dealing with cools or warm colours, that can reflect maybe yourself and the location as well to a degree.
Yeah, and I'm normally all my images are blue. My Instagram feed was ridiculously blue for a long time, and then suddenly it changed a little bit over lockdown when you know it changes, doesn't it, with the subject matter that you're photographing. But yeah, definitely colours are interesting to play with as well, and just, you know, I've opened myself. My photography has been pushed definitely this year, just from being pushed, and I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it. So I hope that everybody else has that little bit of extra time at the moment to push themselves as well and be creative and just prioritize it. That's my thing. I think, you know, prioritize it, 'cause it's very important for us.
Yeah. A lovely comment from Helen here. I'm working on a project creating collages on my daily walk. It's amazing what you can find 10 minutes from your front door. And that's exactly what we're talking about, Helen. So that is absolutely right.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Margaret, can I throw you one slightly technical question? I know
Go on.
we don't do a huge amount of technical questions on here.
I'll try and get it right.
No, it's. I'm sure you'll know the answer. Have all these pictures taken with a macro or a zoom lens or a bit of, like, what do you walk around? Do you keep your stuff fairly light if you're just wandering around?
Oh, well, I'll tell you another story then. So just literally before lockdown, we didn't know that COVID was coming at this point. I bought a Fuji GFX, and I bought I borrowed a 250mm lens from Ford's for a week to try, and then we got locked down. So I ended up having it with me for some time. Anyway, I've bought it now. So I also took with me a macro extension tube. And so I was in the situation where I had this new camera, and I wasn't really sure how that was going to work. So basically, most of these images that you see were taken with the GFX with a 250mm lens with a macro extension tube on, which I know is really unusual, but it
Mm.
was really good fun because it was just like, well, how on earth is this going to work? And it took me quite a while to get it working, but once it did, it's some really lovely effects coming through.
Well, I think that the comment that Linda made earlier as well, she went out with a lens she wasn't used to using. You know, just having one setup and one location is a great thing to do. You know, we all have so much stuff, don't we? And we think we're giving ourselves more choices, but really we're killing ourselves with choice. So that's really interesting. Right. We're obviously getting into summer here, Margaret, in these images.
Yes, it changes. It's kind of like
was this midge ridden at this time of year?
Yes, or? I think it was. Yeah, it's about August maybe at that point. I have a lovely quote from Louis Schwartzberg. Does anybody know Louis Schwartzberg? He's an amazing guy, and he did you should look up the TED talk he did called Happiness Revealed, and I'm just going to read it to you because I think a few minutes of like just sinking into this would be really nice for everybody. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
So this is him speaking. You think this is just another day in your life. It's not just another day. It's the one day that's been given to you today. It's given to you. It's a gift. It's the only gift that you have right now. And the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If you do nothing else but to cultivate that response through the great gift that is unique days. If you learn to respond as if it was the first day of a life, the very last day, then you will have spent this day very well. Begin by opening your eyes and be surprised at your eyes to open. That incredible array of colours that is constantly offered to us. Look at the sky. We so rarely look at the sky. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah, I want to.
Everybody's gone. But he's got a point, hasn't he? You know.
Yeah.
You know,
and we forget it too often, don't we?
Do. Yeah. So we can photograph the sky. There's another project.
So I mean, how do you? I mean, you mentioned the quote there, and I know you have little inspirational bits. Do you have to keep reminding yourself sometimes of things like this? That it's very easy, isn't it, to get swept up in the day to day. You've got emails to answer. You're trying to progress your life, career, whatever it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you keep yourself, reconnected like that?
Yeah, I'm very conscious of that. I am actually, I'm naturally quite a positive person. So I'm naturally always wanting to, I always see the good side in things anyway. And I'm very aware that I need to be creative for my well-being. And I think, actually in a way I've structured my whole life around well-being, and that comes through being out in nature, and it also comes through being a photographer, because I believe that photographing in nature is very good for you, and it certainly is for me. I've forgotten the question, but I'll just keep talking.
No, that's okay. So Margaret, actually, sorry. Can I just? Linda has asked if you could just repeat the name of the owner of the quote.
Sure. It's Louis Schwartzberg, and it's Happiness Revealed. If you look up his TED talk, it's a wonderful thing to just sit and watch for 5 minutes. I think he does a lot of time lapse and puts it together with these sort of words. Amazing stuff. Anyway, so nice. We'll move on just to this last couple of images, and now these images. Okay, so when it got through to September. Thank you, Colin. It got through to September. I needed to take my son to university in Edinburgh, and so I took my van down, dropped him off, and thought, well, it's a long way back, so I'm going to go to. This was one of my first trips out. Actually, I went to a campsite in Belhaven Bay near Edinburgh, which is on the coast. Now, I used to surf at Belhaven Bay, and so I adored it, and I was really looking forward to getting to the beach, and. I got up at 5:45 that morning, and I was wanting to walk to Tinian Beach, I think it is. I don't know that beach so well. And I thought, well, I'm going to do that this morning, and I really want to do it. So I got my bag on, and I started walking out to it. I was really looking forward to it, and I just looked at it, and it was just too far. I knew I wasn't going to make it. I wasn't fit enough yet. I wasn't well enough to do it. So I put my bag down in this lane that was on the way to the beach, and it was something like 6:30 by then. So the sun was just coming up, and I thought, right, okay, what can we do instead? and there were these grasses here, and they were just like swaying in the wind, and the sun was just lighting them up with this sort of soft colours, and it was just absolutely wonderful to just sit in that lane and sit in the grasses again, and just observing, you know, how your angle changes so if you've got silhouettes or the grasses against the trees, you can see in the background how that changes. And you know, I just had a really lovely time, and I think that doing that, it was kind of like finding pleasure in that compromise. It was a compromise. I wanted to get to the beach. I wasn't going to make it, but you know, finding the alternatives, like I suppose a lot of you at the moment, you'd rather go to elsewhere to photograph. But if you can look for those moments of joy and find pleasure in photographing something local, then it's a really positive thing for you to be doing.
Yeah, and I think that flexibility to adjust. You know, you might have a plan, but the plan might not be going to work. You know, you might have underestimated the distance. It might be you know the weather. You know, so do you think, is that something? Because I know, Margaret, you do a lot of you do some workshops for Light and Land, and you help people in other ways. Do you find that's something that people sometimes come with a bit of not baggage with? I don't mean that in a bad way, but we're often ready to kind of say, if only, or I should have been over there.
Oh, definitely.
Could have been
here.
But it's, how do you help people break that down?
Yeah, you hear people say, "Oh, if only the weather was just, you know," or "we just missed that," or you know, you often hear that, and it's trying to show people that actually there's always something there. It's a very difficult thing to do, but I think that if you can lead by example, it helps certainly, and just leading people towards you know, these intimate landscapes that we're talking about today. They're everywhere. So sometimes we'll get to a location and not everybody wants to photograph like a big wide beach or big wide landscape. It isn't everybody's cup of tea, and it can also seem quite overwhelming. So I think encouraging people to look at the ground and look behind them, and just to see what else there is within that landscape is a really important thing to do. And you find that then the people who naturally connect to these small landscapes and these more abstract or experimental imagery just become happy because they've had permission to do that, you know. And sometimes we come with preconceived ideas of needing to get those big wide scenes that are correctly exposed and, you know, at the right f-stop and whatnot. And so just giving people permission that you don't have to do that is quite a big thing, I think.
Yeah, and it seems I feel like there's been a bit of a move towards that within this sort of niche that we're all in the landscape. I don't want to pad everybody with the same thing there, but it's, you know, we're all mostly aware of, certainly in the UK, certain photographers, and you see certain patterns and trends to some degree. And it feels, I don't know, someone brought this up at a camera club thing I was at even a couple of years ago. In fact, I'll tell you who it was. It was Matthew Cattell, the former Landscape Photographer of the Year winner. And he mentioned, because we had a speaker there, he mentioned, you know, why do we think people have moved towards these more inner landscape images? And I know you've sort of touched on that, but do you think there's other reasons as well? Do you think it's just that there's been good proponents of that and that's encouraged people on, or do you think people are connecting slightly differently with the landscape?
Maybe it's this, they're seeing more and actually they've always wanted to do it, or secretly done it and not shown them. But you know, because there's more out there now, maybe it's more. It seems okay that it's a good thing to do. You know, there's a lot of ICM out there at the moment, isn't there? That's quite. I find that really interesting. Not for me, but I think it's really good fun to do it. And I think the people that are doing it are amazing. The work is just spectacular, some of it. So maybe it's just again that sort of permission to be imperfect, which is an amazing thing to have permission to do, because nobody's perfect. And you know, we are reaching for perfection. We will never achieve it. A lot of my images are not technically correct, and they wouldn't make the cut in a competition, definitely. But being okay with that, and those images have got more emotion to them, if you like, and that they're maybe not technically correct, but they're more emotive. Maybe there's an opening up towards that kind of trend, which I think is brilliant. I think that's amazing. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
She's thrown it back to me. We're on
I
my
have.
half an hour now. No, I think there's a little. I think there's most of exactly what you've said is basically absolutely true. And I think probably a lot of people come to landscape photography because of it's an escape for them, isn't it? And they enjoy being outside.
Yeah.
And maybe now this is just another avenue to really feel like you can slow down a bit. You can try and be super attentive and in touch and physically aware of what's happening, even the very small details. So I mean, it's nothing new in terms of photographically. There's always, people have explored all sorts of things, haven't they? But I think what is new is people like yourself doing a really good job of promoting the fact that it's more than the photography. Being a photographer is about your connections, what it can actually do for you positively, for your well-being, both mentally and physically, and your understanding of the world, as well. If that's fair to say. And do check out Margaret's website, everybody, margaretsoraya.com, and I've put that up there on the screen for you.
Thank you.
Now, she's not going anywhere. She's going to be here to quiz me, and I've obviously let you run, Margaret, because I just want to give you the main show there. But a couple of questions have come in, so maybe let's just pop those up quickly before I crack on. So Chris said, do you feel that there's a trend to get away from being technically perfect and just taking pictures that satisfy ourselves? We've sort of covered that a little, but anything extra to add on that, Margaret?
All I can say is I hope so. I think it's a lovely thing to do, to just create for yourself. I think when you start creating for yourself and not for anything else, not for any other reason, and definitely not for being perfect, you start to create authentic, genuine and powerful images. So just create for yourself and don't worry about perfection. There we go.
Good stuff. And Juliet has said, just to say, this is helping so much. I felt lost with creative spirit after worry through lockdown, and this is inspiring me to just go out and shoot rather than worry about what folk want to see. Yes, Juliet.
Absolutely. We're not going to do anything that what folk want to see. That doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It's irrelevant.
Exactly. Linda, this is a great quote. Sorry, before I get on. This is so cool being able to share these with you. I really enjoy this new streaming platform, everybody. Let us know if you're enjoying it, because I don't know what you're seeing. Okay, I can only see from my end, so it's great to let us know if you guys are loving it. Linda says, perfection is the enemy of progress.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very nice.
Good quote.
Good quote. All right.
Okay, shall we move on to you now?
Yes, sorry, I've been trying to put it off, haven't I? So it's super interesting because I think we've talked about lockdown and how we both, well, certainly Margaret's explained how she had perhaps the physical limitations because of the situation she was in, but obviously found a different way to connect with the landscape that was with her and around her at the time, and did that so very successfully in terms of very emotive images and atmospheric images. I had a different sort of lockdown in that I do a lot of other commercial work to do with photography, videography and web-based marketing things. And actually I took on a lot more of that because a lot of the landscape photography things that I do obviously became a lot more difficult to do in terms of going out and doing one-to-ones, workshops, everything else. However, for my sins, I decided it might be a good idea to pull together some work and a project that I'd been doing and I'd had actually shot, believe it or not, in 2017. And I'd been sitting on this work, and Margaret, I'll be honest, it was probably because I knew it was a bit different. I knew it wasn't what people were used to seeing from me. Weirdly, it was the work it's the only work I ever think I've done that's good. and I was probably very protective about it, and I was probably not scared, but I was conscious of just putting that out there would be a slightly different way for me to go. So that's kind of true to what you were just talking about there, about being given the thumbs up to kind of release yourself in a way. Do
you feel like you shot this for yourself? Just
yes,
for yourself? Yeah.
I did. And I look back on it and it made sense to live in the book, which it kind of ended up being in. But at the time, it was very much a free kind of approach to the photography. There were inspirations in my mind, which I'm going to talk about, but the actual process of shooting was very free and very different and very loose, basically. So apologies. I know there's a couple of you on this stream who have probably seen me talk about this project before, because I've been babbling to everyone I can talk-wise this year camera clubs, RPS, etc., etc. So I'm going to not just repeat that ad nauseum, primarily for time reasons, but also I'm going to try and link it into the fact that Margaret's here and what we've been talking about. So let me just get to the crux of it. This book was, I think, driven from two things. One was that looser and more freewheeling approach to the subject matter and the landscape and my local area, and a desire to do something different in Dorset. I live on the Dorset near the south coast, very famous photographically, very what shall I say? There's some real hot spots, as it were, which we're used to seeing, which is great. And if you've never been there, you need to go and look at them because they're wonderful to shoot. But I always have had a slightly different motivation with my work, and also with this particular work. And so I've put this map up, and you might think, what is he talking about here? But I was reading a lot, and I get my inspiration a lot not from photography, and even probably to some degree not as much from being outside as I would contend that Margaret does. And this is why it's really interesting how we all approach things differently. Like her, though, I do read a lot of things, and I listen to a lot of stuff, podcasts and all sorts of things. And sometimes something sits in my mind, and I then try and bring that out of myself photographically, or I think, well, what can I do with my camera that would kind of be a way for me to comment on this in my own little way, or bring my own kind of story to this. And for me, living in this on this Jurassic coast, I was just absolutely fascinated by the fact that the time period that this covers and that this talks about is just mind-blowing, isn't it? You know, we are the very thin edge of this line here. You can see the chap with the spear. I mean, that's more Wales than England. No, I'm joking. But, you know, time-wise, so we talk about history being, you know, 5,000 years, 10,000 years. That feels mind-boggling. But really, that is a puff of tiny speck of nothing in the grand scheme of time. So what I was excited by was the possibility to try and shoot something that didn't have to live in the here and now. It didn't have to refer to anything that we understand to be here and now, because no one knows what the Earth looked like 250 million years ago. I mean, you know, they speculate, but nobody knows. We weren't there, were we? So I thought that was really interesting, Margaret, just to be able to detach myself from time and take myself somewhere where there were no rules about what anything looked like, up, down, left, right, you know, whatever it might be. And I think irrespective of what you believe happened at this beginning bit, we all can't get away from the fact that there was this huge bit in between where the Earth changed massively. So part of it was time, exploring the idea of time, and that's something that we do in our photography generally. Even with a simple exposure, we're always making a decision about time. And I wanted to take that way further and flip it over and disrupt it and think about time within the era of what I might have been shooting. And so I set about this task of trying to give my reinterpretation of 189 million years. Mad, isn't it, when you say it like that? Yeah. Completely bonkers. And so it did turn out to be. But that was a little bit of the background, and I think that's worth knowing. So the project consisted of 30 images, and this is an interesting point to do with words with text with photography. And maybe we can pause for a sec on this, Margaret, but I know it's a bit of a hot topic. Some people I've run into, I won't name names, very well-known landscape photographers believe that your pictures should never need any words. And then I've run into other people, probably more on the documentary side and reportage end of things, where they believe very strongly that, yes, the picture obviously has to stand up of its own, but the words can bring a different subjectivity and context. I don't know, how do you feel about writing with your photography, just if we pause on that for a sec?
I love writing with my photography. I think it gives another depth, another layer, but it also, what it does, it allows you to explore the reasons behind your photography more. So when you're writing your thoughts down, whether that's with the images or just, you know, at the same time, you know, whether it's presented in a book with them, I like reading with images in a book. But even if you're writing because you're exploring your own processes, I think it allows you to go deeper than just the image making process. I think that the words and the thoughts behind it are really, really important. So personally, I'm a big fan of writing. I know a lot of people shy away from it. A lot of people will say it's not needed. I think a lot of people find it difficult But I love the fact that you're exploring something that you're genuinely interested in, and the images are a product of that. I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you do struggle with writing, don't be afraid to get someone else in. You know, find someone else who might be able to assist you with that, or bring their own text. You know, words or music or whatever. Any sort of collaboration is a great thing to explore as well. I think in this instance, the images are very abstract, and you're about to see that. And if those of you who haven't seen it before, and we talked about technique and whatnot. I'm a big fan in a way, and I probably have to be slightly careful how I say it, that technique should always be servicing intent. You know, the technique is not enough of itself. The technique should be bringing something. It might be bringing the mood, it might be relating your feeling, and in this instance there's stuff going on within the world, physically and geographically, that we're changing, and I tried to represent that with the images. So let me just kind of give you an example of that. So with each section, there's 5 sections of the work, and each one has 6 images within it and a set of text that goes with it as well. And I'm kind of explaining to you all as creative people, kind of inside, as it were. I wanted to use the text to set the scene and to kind of signal and flag where I might be going with the images. And I think the whole point of the final book was to help people just read this and drift away a few million years ago and let them kind of dream that they might be there. And so the text played its own little part. So I won't read it all necessarily, but this part of the story is the beginning, and we're talking about this period 252 million years ago where there was a huge mass extinction event. It's mildly topical at the moment. And I talk about this extinction event marking the end of hundreds of millions of years of life, and it paving the way for a fresh era of new creation where life would flourish. So I'm trying to set the scene that the world is in disorder and it's in chaos. And then what I try to do with the images is bring some of that disorder and some of that chaos. And I think if the two things can work together, the text and the images in this particular instance, that's hopefully adding strength from each end. Now, the reason why I wanted to put this in, and we talked about inner landscapes and shooting locally, all of the images you're going to see were shot within 5 meters of each other on one bit of beach, multiple visits, but on one very bland looking beach to the average eye, but hopefully, as Margaret's shown as well, with some creativity and with a little bit of thought and attention, you can take things that look very mundane into different directions with your imagery. So here, if I can just make one little point, the point of this panel was to set the scene of the world being in disorder. There's been this event and disruption. I'm not trying to be totally literal about it, but even where we position the images within the panel. So the first one here on the left, it has the least structure, the least form, the most disarray. And yet by the time we get to the end of the 6, which in the book follows one after another, you start to have a little bit of form, a little bit of solidity, a little bit of sense of structure, because I'm trying to say now the earth is kind of settling, there is form, there is not total chaos anymore. And as we move it on, we get to this second period where new life begins to grow. And in this period, I put in the text, again, this is kind of like a signal, a network of sandy rivers flowed in from the south and carved their way across the arid landscape. So I was very careful about the words that I used to try and signal. So we're talking about sandy rivers flowing and carving, and then with our imagery we kind of follow that up, hopefully. And everybody knows what sand is, right? We know the colour, we know water, we know how water moves. And Margaret, I know you're a big fan of water. Do you find that a constant inspiration for you? The never-ending movement, I think, is what inspires me.
Yeah, I think, as I'm looking at these images, can I just say, and the words as well, I think that they're very powerful, and the reason that it's powerful is because you've got the words and the images, and it's very much like you. When you see photographers, that their work fits them as a person. And I can see that with your work here. You can see your genuine interest in this. When your work is basically a reflection of you as a person, isn't it? does that make sense? I'm going off topic here a little bit, but
No, yeah.
I can see you in these words and these thought processes, and the images are just become so powerful because of that, because you've got those things that are working together. So I think that these are just amazing. I really love the images, but I like the thought process behind them, and I like the fact that you are putting your heart into this, and it's something you're really, really interested in. So when you look at my work, it's much more emotive and creative and kind of nature. My values are nature and being quietness and being, by myself, and your values obviously slightly different. I don't know what they are. You maybe want to think about that. But it comes through in your work. So these are just amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Carry on now.
No, thank you. I think the key is, though, like you said earlier, to find what inspires you, find what motivates
That's
you.
what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And do more of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think I would actually contend that probably storytelling is the big thing that appeals to me. And as I've gone on with my photography, that's become more and more. And a lot of the work I've been doing recently, which no one's seen yet because I'm always a little bit ahead, is about storytelling. And it isn't quite as abstract as this, but I think the thread is always about a story. How can I use the camera to tell a story? And I think that's probably because I've got a lot of influence from the documentary end of things, but I just practice it in a different place to them, if you see what I mean. But yeah, and with this, I think hopefully you're right. The text really adds and the complements. Let's say they both work together from that point of view. And just from the point of view of laying out your images and books and whatnot, it does help to have little segments where you can stop one bit and you bring the person into the next bit. And I use the text just kind of as a little break for that as well. And as we get through here into the third period, I talk about rocks beginning to form in shallow seabeds, and reptiles began their reign across this new landscape. Structure and form was beginning to become seemingly more permanent. And then again, that's kind of what we try and deliver on the images. And these actually, these were very popular with the print. So people on the luxury thing could choose a print. And I do think that we still appreciate some form a lot of the times. People like to have something physical they understand within the image, perhaps, I'm not sure. But one thing I would say about these is that scale is very important, and ambiguity of scale is a fun thing to play with. I'm very lucky to have had a couple of these printed huge, and even if I look at it on my screen here at home, which is just a big desktop, I know that full screen, that's bigger than it was in reality. And a lot of the time with photography, with landscape photography, we're used to seeing big things squashed into a small frame, right? And actually to flip that on its head is quite an interesting thing, I think, to play with.
I love the smoothness of the orange, the rock in the bottom right there.
Yes, it's there was lots of queries about what this was when you see it large. It's just a little pebble, but I told everyone it was a dinosaur egg. That seems to be the thing. And I'll keep us moving just for time reasons. But in the fourth period, again, we talk about things changing, and as time passed, this seabed environment changed rapidly. And so I mention here in the text that there's sandstone grit and limestone layers that would entomb the fossils of this ancient world. And I try and use slightly emotive words there, because again, we're selling the story, aren't we? We're selling that escapism, I think, within the words and within the text. And if I can, Margaret, I want to tell just a little story about this one, this far bottom right-hand side one. And anyone who's seen me talk about this year, two things. One, you'll be happy this is the last talk of anything I'm doing to do with Mesozoic, because I'm putting it to bed after this. But two, this, I don't know if you can see it because it is very small on the screens probably you're watching it on. This was the last image I shot of the whole project. It isn't the last one in the series. There's 6 more to come, but it was the last one I shot. And I got to know this beach and this particular segment very intimately. I always went, and I suspect you're the same, Margaret. We've never shot together, but I sit down, my bag goes down, the camera doesn't come out for a period. I'm just watching and listening and feeling. Are you like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes it can take me an hour to actually move my camera. That's the best way.
I'm very similar. And I'd got to know all these rocks. It sounds weird, but I'd go and just stroke them, not in a weird way, but you want to feel texture, right? Because that can affect your image making sometimes. And it just happened on this last morning. I just turned, and this dinosaur's head just leapt out at me, and I couldn't unsee it. You know, it's a bit like when you see something in the clouds, you say to the person lying next to you, that looks like a whatever. You know, and when you spot it, you can't get rid of it. And for me, I just saw this dinosaur's head, and I think what it comes down to, the eye, the top jaw, the bottom jaw, was that I had my mind so firmly in that story that just presented itself, and you know, it gave itself to me. It's a weird thing, isn't it? I don't want to be too kind of hippie about it, but I reckon it was.
Are you, so when you're doing more work with stories, are you connecting the stories at all, or is it different elements? So is this project going to be related to the next one in any way?
No. But potentially, but that's not happened yet. No, the work I've been doing in the last year has very much been around environmental landscape stuff, so ecological things and that end of stuff. But a couple of people have asked if I'm going to do the period before this, which I would love to, but you can't force it, can you?
No.
It will just come out of me at some point if it does, and if it doesn't, it's not supposed to come out of me.
You have to be genuinely interested in it, otherwise it won't happen. It's got to come from your heart. It's got to be something that you really. There is a dinosaur in the top left one as well, Lynn. I can see it.
Yeah, there's a diplodocus, isn't there, up there? Yeah, and actually, someone's mentioned there that yes, this part here in the middle, this bottom middle one, is this here on the right hand side, and they were literally, one was shot right after the other, because as I turned my camera around, the head popped out, and that's what I saw. And so that's just a neat little behind the scenes for you there. And as we get to the last one, and thank you for everyone for bearing with us. Very good of you to all stay along with myself and Margaret. Hopefully you found it interesting and inspiring in some way. You never know. Just for the point of view of this Mesozoic then, to wrap it up, the story ends with another mass extinction event. Always good to end on a happy note, where where the vast majority of things on Earth died. It's terrible, isn't it? But for our story, just from a pure mechanics of how a story works, we have a beginning, we had a middle, and now we have an end. And storytelling is the oldest trick in the book, along with death, taxes, and the other one, which I won't mention on the live stream. But in the book, I wanted to talk about how the world was basically thrown back into turmoil, physically and visually. And so I talk about darkness falling across the land and the Mesozoic era coming to a close. And then obviously that's what we do with our images. We take that story and we run with it visually, and we try and represent that. Now, just a tiny little Easter egg, if I can. Again, those who've seen me talk will know this. These I repurposed slightly. There was a couple of these I'd already shot. I was working on an idea about a shipwreck. So if you imagine off the coast in the winter, 150 years ago, you're bringing in some swag, some booty, some booze probably, you know, off the Devon, Cornwall, Dorset area. The wind's coming, it's raining, the ship hits the ground, it tips you over the side. You're in the water, you don't know what's up, what's down, there's rain hitting you. And so I'd been working on this idea, and I think going back to using techniques, I think they should only ever be to fulfill a purpose. A bit like with a musician, they need to know how to use every technique and thing on their instrument, but it means nothing unless they're saying something with it, right? And that's kind of the big thing I try and work with. So this one in the middle and this one next to it had been part of that shipwreck series, and I kind of hadn't quite got off the ground with it, or in the water, so to speak. And I repurposed it for this. So sometimes you have images that you may have already shot, and lockdown's a good time to go back through those and have a think. Could they make sense to something you're doing now? Could they make sense to, a different project or anything else? So that's just a little bit of a behind the scenes there. And I think that's an excellent segue, if I say so myself, Margaret,
Yes.
to take us on to what's coming next week. And just before I do, thank you for the comments that are coming in. Ralph, this has been a great evening. I have your book, Sam, but this makes it all the more understandable. I'm always seeing things in inanimate things. Yes, I think there's a lot of that, isn't there? And Duncan, brilliant gig tonight with great supporting images to tell your story. Love the idea of free thinking and creative photography. Thank you, Duncan. I mentioned just there, and I'll just mention this and then we'll have a little goodbye with Margaret. Next week, next Tuesday, 8 p.m, we're going to be back, or I am certainly, with the boss, with Charlie. Charlie Waite's going to be here. He rang me up. He said, I'm not on enough. No, he didn't. It's not true. I rang him up and said, please come on. And he's going to do something also lockdown related, in that he has been going back through some images and he's actually found, but I'll let him tell the story, a load of images that he thought had been lost to the annals of time. He's found the negatives, and he's been going back through some of them. And so he's going to share with us some images that you will never have seen, that he's been going back through. And if you guys can't get out, if it's terribly rainy, or you've got other reasons that you can't get out, or you're stuck in an urban situation, or whatever it might be, why not go through some of your back catalogue? Why not have a think about whether there's things you could pull together as a little project to set? They don't all have to be from the same place. Like Margaret showed us earlier, there's things that can pull it together to do with light, colour, whatever else it might be. But Margaret, any other final bits to add just before I wrap us up for the evening? And thank you for your time. That's the big thing I would say.
That's okay. I think I'm all talked out now. So
Okay.
thank you so much. It was really enjoyable.
Cool. And actually, I will say this was Margaret's fantastic idea to have this topic and for us to approach it in this way. So big thank you to her, and for coming on with me and being flexible to try this new method. And for all the love and comments that are coming in, we appreciate it as well. We're going to be here for the next few weeks, all the way to Christmas. But from myself and Margaret tonight, I'm going to end this one, and we shall speak to you all very soon. Goodbye.
Bye.